Most executives would like to believe that they're in charge of their organizations, that they make the crucial decisions, and that when they decide that something should be done, everyone snaps to and executes. This chapter expands on the view already introduced, that in practice it is a company's customers who effectively control what it can and cannot do. As we have seen in the disk drive industry, companies were willing to bet enormous amounts on technologically risky projects when it was clear that their customers needed the resulting products, but they were unable to muster the wherewithal to execute much simpler disruptive projects if existing, profitable customers didn't need the products. This observation supports a somewhat controversial theory called resource dependence, propounded by a minority of management scholars, which posits that companies' freedom of action is limited to satisfying the needs of those entities outside the firm, customers and investors primarily, that give it the resources it needs to survive. Drawing heavily upon concepts from biological evolution, resource dependence theorists assert that organizations will survive and prosper only if their staffs and systems serve the needs of customers and investors by providing them with the products, services, and profit they require. Organizations that do not will ultimately die off, starved of the revenues they need to survive. Hence, through this survival of the fittest mechanism, those firms that rise to prominence in their industries generally will be those whose people and processes are most keenly tuned to giving their customers what they want. The controversy with this theory arises when its proponents conclude that managers are powerless to change the courses of their firms against the dictates of their customers. Even if a manager has a bold vision to take her or his company in a very different direction, the power of the customer-focused people and processes in any company well adapted to survival in its competitive environment will reject the manager's attempts to change direction. Therefore, because they provide the resources upon which the firm is dependent, it is the customers, rather than the managers, who really determine what a firm will do. It is forces outside the organization, rather than the managers within it, that dictate the company's course. Resource dependence theorists conclude that the real role of managers in companies whose people and systems are well adapted to survival is, therefore, only a symbolic one. For those of us who have managed companies, consulted for management, or taught future managers, this is a most disquieting thought. We are there to manage, to make a difference, to formulate and implement strategy, to accelerate growth and improve profits. Resource dependence violates our very reason for being. Nonetheless, the findings reported in this book provide rather stunning support for the theory of resource dependence, especially for the notion that the customer-focused resource allocation and decision-making processes of successful companies are far more powerful in directing investments than are executives' decisions. Clearly, customers wield enormous power in directing a firm's investments. What then should managers do when faced with a disruptive technology that the company's customers explicitly do not want? One option is to convince everyone in the firm that the company should pursue it anyway, that it has long-term strategic importance despite rejection by the customers who pay the bills and despite lower profitability than the upmarket alternatives. The other option would be to create an independent organization and embed it among the emerging customers that do need the technology. Which works best? Managers who choose the first option essentially are picking a fight with a powerful tendency of organizational nature, that customers, not managers, essentially control the investment patterns of a company. By contrast, managers who choose the second option align themselves with this tendency, harnessing rather than fighting its power. The cases presented in this chapter provide strong evidence that the second option offers far higher probabilities of success than the first. Innovation and resource allocation. The mechanism through which customers control the investments of a firm is the resource allocation process, the process that determines which initiatives get staff and money and which don't. Resource allocation and innovation are two sides of the same coin. Only those new product development projects that do get